It's just being really intentional on human first, human first, human first. And if we keep that in mind and we're more conscious as we build, then we're going to create this really beautiful, positive future that we're all here to create. Or what's the point? Like, what if we're not creating a better way to live with these technologies? What is the point?
All right, everybody, it's 2025. Welcome to the 8th episode of the AI Space Podcast. We have Lorraine, founder of House and Nova, with us. We have an exciting episode for you today. So welcome to the AI Space Podcast. You know, all AI unicorns are born, they're built, but how? So here at the AI Space Podcast, we strive to encourage and empower AI founders, innovators, technologists, startups, and businesses to drive innovation and scale their initiatives with game-changing insights. I'm your host, Sanjay Kalluvilayil, founder and CEO of Stonehouse Advisors, a consultancy dedicated to helping AI leaders struggling with cash flows to create value and maximizing valuations to fund growth, successful capital raises, and/or strategic exits. Once again, this is the 8th episode, and we're thrilled to have Lorraine, House and Nova here. She's building a global community empowering women entrepreneurs and creatives to thrive in Web3, AI, and digital fashion. Nova is also the founder of a stealth startup, developing a digitally native Couture platform that integrates dynamic digital collectibles with immersive gaming and AR experiences in the luxury space. We have an awesome agenda again for you. We're going to get into the technology stack. We're going to talk about business scaling, ethical and responsible AI, AI democratization, finally some words of encouragement. So Nova, we're going to kick it off here on the AI Space Podcast. We highlight game-changing insights that drive innovation and help businesses scale their initiatives. What do you see as the hottest trends in AI for 2025?
Oh, well, AI video and animation. I mean, you can't escape it. Everywhere you turn around, there's a new film, a new commercial, a new ad, and they're fun to watch and see. So I think that what I've seen in the creatives in the space is using known brands to create fictional ads, which is interesting. But what I would like to continue to see more of are just deeper storylines and short films that could actually enter festivals. And that's something that I'm working on behind the scenes because I love storytelling and I'm just real excited about these tools. So that's one. So AI films, animation, you can't get away as well with personalization. Like every time you turn around, it's, at least I'm using the term hyper personalization as it relates to AI, and it's just going to continue to move forward. How do you take these general, applications and platforms and continue to personalize them for niche industries, but then also to create solutions that are more personal to individuals? So for example, within the fashion space, virtual try-ons is something that a handful of startups are still trying their hand at perfecting. I'm someone who does not like shopping online because it's a disaster. Like 90% of the things would go back because they don't fit properly. So how are these solutions helping empower individuals such as myself to take advantage of what's been around for a ton of years, e-commerce? But if you aren't the standard muse that the brands are creating their product for, how do you shop without feeling horrible that everything you're buying is not fitting you properly? So that's also something. And then voice. This is really exciting. Having AI agents, which again, another buzzword, but in the sense where you are having conversations more and more with these chatbots. Bordy is a perfect example. I don't know if you tried Bordy yet. Ton of fun. And they're getting more real-like. So again, we're going to see an integration of more voice chats, voice bots within these applications.
Awesome. No, I think those are wonderful insights, especially on the video. And, I'm playing with a lot of text to video generation type tools. There's a little nuance to it, a little bit of, you got to do the right prompting. There's a bit of art to it also, right? So second question is about scaling. So what insights have you seen the last year that founders are using to scale up their businesses?
Oh, gosh. I would say, like for me, one example is lead generation. So there's a tool called Getly AI, and it's all about, again, going back to the buzzword hyper personalization. How do you hone in on the right customer so you're not wasting your time? How do you craft more personal, human sounding messages that you can scale? Because, especially as founders and startups, you have such a limited amount of time and you're wearing so many hats. So for me, being able to acquire lead lists more easily and to be able to scale messaging that where you don't lose that human touch, I think that's something that I see, more and more founders looking for are tools such as these.
Awesome, awesome. So before we continue, I want to invite everyone to follow Nova Lorraine and like, comment, subscribe to the AI Space podcast because that helps us grow the show to have more impressive guests like Nova. So could you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got here? What led you on this foray into AI and your path to House of Nova? Tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, definitely not a straightforward path. It's definitely a zigzag. My journey actually
Yeah,
started.
mine's more zag and zig. So
Yours more zag than zig. Mine is definitely zig, zig, zag. So I was born in Jamaica, so I just have to set the scene here. Immigrant here as a young child, first generation to go to college here. And anyone that is from the Caribbean, there's like 5 careers that you can choose when you're here in the US. So I knew from a young age I wanted to help people. And the most obvious way of doing that was through medicine. And so I was on a path to become a doctor. And so I got into grad school, got my in a PhD program, full scholarship for clinical psychology. And I was teaching undergrad psych. I had my patient load. And one day on the way to class, I had this divine download that I was going to help people, wait for it, through my love of fashion. Okay, so here I am in the middle of Connecticut, cow country, and nowhere near, the metropolitan cities that are super fashionable like New York, Miami, LA, etc. And I have this download that I'm going to help people through my love of fashion. Now, I will say every day was my runway. Like any excuse to get dressed up, I would take advantage of it. And I have very stylish parents, but like that was the extent of it. Like I was hardcore in the sciences for so many years. So it kind of threw me. And I ignored it at first, but it got to a point where I couldn't. And so I took a leap of faith, finished early with my master's, moved to New York, went on to the Fashion Institute of Technology to get my design degree. And I launched my fashion collection a few years after graduating. And then 5 years into that journey, which was incredible, getting my designs in films and on TV and major magazines like Vogue, I decided to launch Rain magazine. And why that's so important is because Rain is about the future of fashion, culture, and technology. And that was my beginning journey into this futurism space, becoming a futurist, because myself and my team had to curate who and what are going to be the next big things in the next 5 to 7 years. And so in 2013, I did an article on Bitcoin, and that's when I got bit by the blockchain bug, is what I call it. And that led me into Web3 full time in 2020. And then that journey led me to generative AI in 2022. And so now with what I'm doing under the House of Nova is bringing together fashion with a variety of emerging technologies, which include generative AI, blockchain, AR, VR, immersive technology, 3D spaces, bringing it all together, this world that I've been in for the last 5 years, just diving deep on the tech side and now bringing back my fashion into it. So coming full circle.
awesome, awesome. So tell us a little bit more about House of Nova then.
Yeah. So imagine if Coco Chanel was alive today and launching her fashion house, the House of Chanel, with all these incredible tools as the disruptor that she was in her time, as the innovator, creating the first synthetic fragrance, for example, and still being ranked #1 in the world as a fragrance. Like, really? And so what I imagine is, what would the future of fashion look like in the next 5 to 10 years? And how do we build that future-facing legacy fashion house with these emerging technologies powered by things like AI and AR, for example? And so that's what I'm doing. It's digitally native. We know our younger generations, your Gen Alphas, your Gen Zs, are digitally native. And digital assets are going to hold just as much value, and in some cases, more value than physical assets, but not undermining or dismissing the importance of the value that physical experiences and products bring. And so the House of Nova takes into account this physical world that we know and live in every day with what's coming on this digital side of things. I call it the digital city we're building, and we're bringing it together. And so we're creating experiences through AI-powered apps. So, for example, we're in a beta with Aura AI, and that's AURRA AI. And imagine an AI stylist powered by AI that's personality-driven, helping you reduce anxiety when you get dressed for events. So you see how the psychology is coming into that? And then creating digital wearables that you can then order on demand and wear physically. So we're creating immersive dynamic runway shows. We're creating digital assets for digital spaces and environments. We're doing design, like high-end digital design on demand as a service. And we are playing with AI through AI-powered styling services with Aura. So again, all of that falls under the House of Nova, knowing that we have these incredible technologies that we can use to do better storytelling, increase engagement, increase personalization, as I said, and then tap into a more sustainable world using digital-first solutions, such as digital fashion.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more. Who's your ideal customer profile? So who's a typical user of your services or capabilities, and what would be a good use case of that?
Yeah, I love that question. So I would say it's three-pronged. I would say the first, as it relates to our first core product, Aura, would be event organizers, producers, managers. So may it be someone that's creating a conference, or it could be a bride, with her wedding, someone that's putting together a themed party. These are our customers, anyone that's creating an event. And the whole goal is to gamify these events with fashion. And it's funny because, again, my journey started with psychology, and I am an advocate for well-being, like preventive measures and solutions before we have to get to the psychologist or psychiatrist. And so Aura is like this wellness kind of app, helping you feel more confident and better about yourself, wrapped in fashion. And so that's one customer, the event organizers and producers, and then stylists, that are dealing with customers every day that need extra assistance in getting dressed. And then the consumer, that's a fashion enthusiast. If you want to gamify your experiences around fashion, if you are playing in digital environments and creating and making and buying digital clothing, if you really pay attention to what you wear and want something super personal and special and custom, that would be our third customer set.
Okay, cool. And then you also mentioned you're working on a stealth startup, and you're also going through some sort of process right now. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, what you can tell us.
Yeah, so I am in the middle of a Venturathon. It's being hosted by Tsunami, and so it's a remote hackathon. And so in the next 8 weeks in this accelerator, we're going to be perfecting the MVP of Aura. So it's under beta. You have to have permission to access it. And, once we get through the accelerator, we'll be able to launch that for, again, more expanded beta group. And then that will tie into the digital to physical collection that's coming soon, which will be launching during Fashion Week.
Okay, very good. And, the next section, we're going to cover technology, and maybe we can continue that conversation. So, MVP is a minimum viable product, something you want to get out there, so that way you can test are you solving a pain point, or to prove out your theory, and people are interested in this and they want to buy this, right? So maybe walk us through your approach methodology in this MVP process, for especially the folks that are kind of new in the space and not aware of that, right? Or the importance of it.
Yeah. So, I think with any startup, you get that inspiration for the idea. And thankfully, this came to me when I was in another accelerator, which was hosted by NASA and Virginia Tech Science and Research Park. And so the goal there was to look at various NASA technologies and find a commercial use case. And so the commercial use case I wanted to use was around software, some of the software technologies they had. And one of them was this text-to-voice solution. And I wanted to bring that into what I was conceptualizing around the House of Nova. And so that was the seed. And then that also was coupled with this lean canvas model, which I think was really critical. And when you're, especially if you're launching a scalable tech company, is to really look at that model because it helps you focus in on who the customer is, how are you getting traction, why would they care, all these different things that's so important for a startup to realize. And I had been building very slowly. Initially, I thought I wanted to go after VCs, and I had some, individuals that were interested when I was in Dubai about a year and a half ago. And then I sort of put that on hold, and I said, well, wait a minute. I need to focus more on the product, the user experience, and traction. Let's see if there is a market for this, and let's make sure that how we're entering into the market is going to allow us as much blue ocean as possible. So then I pulled back instead of going after capital initially and started just focusing on the UI, the UX, and slowly having people test it until I got to the point where, okay, I need a little more robust development behind this product. And that's where the journey of accepting the invitation to apply to Tsunami came into play. And what we're doing here is really honing in on a great MVP, as you mentioned, but also how do you perfect the pitch? Because you're not only pitching to your customers, your end user, which will be that fashion enthusiast. I'm pitching to event organizers, which are my B2B customers, but then I'm pitching to investors as well, all at the same time. So the goal is to get to that perfect pitch with each customer but also utilizing what I've learned in the lean canvas model, and also just hitting the pavement and having conversations around the proof of concept that I've built on my own.
Yeah, no, we talk about this quite a bit on this program. A lot of times people think I have a great technology, I have a great strategy. What you said about pitches is very important because product doesn't sell. Very few things sell themselves, right? And the thing is, you have to be able to articulate the message to your target audience in a way that is meaningful and resonates with them, right? And it solves the problems that they need to be solved, and they're willing to pay for it. And it's not an easy proposition, right? And that really requires you doing your homework, rolling up your sleeves, and doing your research, making sure you truly understand, what you're doing. And any thoughts around that?
I agree. I think that, so many people, they have the idea, they're super excited about it, and they're focusing a lot on the actual product itself, tinkering with the product. And that could be months or years. And now you have this, great product that you've been tinkering with, but no one wants it. And you're like, well, wait a minute, this is amazing. And I feel...
Or by the time you got it out, it was amazing 6 months ago.
Exactly.
The market's already passed you,
Exactly. And so a couple of things I had to learn, let go of perfection. I'm a creative, I'm an artist. And something that you're creating artistically is never perfect. There's always something you can do to make it better. So that was one thing. Let go of that. Get out there as quickly as possible with your proof of concept. And in the meantime, have conversations. Is this something people really want? Or maybe only 10 people in the world have this problem. What is your goal in terms of growth and scale? Is it a solution for 10,000 people? Is it a solution for 100 million people? And so doing that research, I think, is so important. So you can save yourself the months and hours, and then also being super flexible where you can pivot when necessary. My initial customer was not event organizers and producers. And I was good, I'm going to go to the end user, the individual customer, the fashion enthusiast. And when I thought about it, I was like, oh, that's a pretty red ocean there, and you're going to need a substantial amount of capital for customer acquisition. And so again, depending on where you are from a resource standpoint, you also have to come up with a strategy that matches where you are today. What is it, people, time, and money that you have as it relates to resources? What are you going to deploy? And does your strategy align? And so I have an event background. I'm public speaking. I travel globally. I have a network of event organizers that reach out to me all the time that I could add value to them with this product. I was a consultant early on at a company that recently sold in the billions. that exited. And I was one of their first 5 employees. But before they even launched, I was a consultant for them. And that was in the B2B event space. And then when I thought about it, I was like, wait a minute, this is a perfect audience for me to go after that I know really well, where there's no competition right now. So getting out there early, as you mentioned, like early to market, even if it's not perfect, that was something that I had to learn. Being ready to pivot, and I pivoted quickly. And then finding support to scale. And that's where the accelerators came into play, because you can't do it alone. And so I think, you make an excellent point there in terms of the research.
And I think you talked about UI, UE, so user interface, user experience, and a lot of times you want to get your clientele to give you feedback. They're going to give you guidance. Hey, it's not so easy to use. You need to make some improvements here and help you figure it out. So you trying to go to like this ivory tower or, lock yourself in a dungeon and try to go invent magic, right? I mean, that usually doesn't usually work like that, right?
Right. And I've done that before. So I'm speaking from experience. And you're like, oh, okay, that was like a waste of time. And so what I learned this time around was pre-sell, pre-sell, pre-sell. You can go 2 paths. You can go day one looking for money, or you can go looking for customers. And I said, I'm going to look for customers. And so if I have enough customers, the money's going to come to me. Investors are going to come, look for me. Or as I'm going to investors, I have a better conversation or a stronger conversation as it relates to the cap table. Like how much do you want? How much am I giving away? What are you giving me in return? Or I could say, you know what? My model isn't really right for your investment dollars. Like maybe I'm not right for VC. Maybe I'm better for angel investment, or maybe angel investment isn't right for me, and I need to scale more quickly with more resources. So I'm going after VCs. So I chose to look for the customers, see if there's a market there, and I started pre-selling. But the issue is I started pre-selling, but my product wasn't ready. So because you don't want to lose those customers either. So it's this fine balance. But I think that if you can build the demand ahead of time, you have so much more information as you were sharing, as you're talking to your customers, and leverage, as it relates to bringing on team members and partners. And of course, if you need that financial support.
Yeah, I think that's a super, super insightful insight, because, I've talked to different folks and they say, like writing a book, you think, can you go write a book and then, get it published? They flipped the order now. It's like saying, go pre-sell your book, see the demand, and then write the book. So it's kind of flipping that order. And I think that's an important insight in this business too, is really being able to figure that part out, especially from your product perspective, be able to pre-sell, right? You're able to gauge the demand, I mean, Apple does it with their iPhones, right? And you're able to gauge the demand and make adjustments, prior to coming out, right?
Yeah, I love that. The book idea, it made me think of, so a few years ago, I was at a writer's conference when I decided that I wanted to write my first book. And I have 2 books behind me that I've published. And I was just focused on writing the book. We were talking about the product, tinkering at the product. And so there was a consultant there, because we have to, or at least you could decide if you wanted to pitch to agents and get an agent in order to get into a publishing house. And so before this pitch session, I met with this agent, and her whole stand, she had this, booth there, and she was publishing a book. So she had the book cover and she had her booth, and here you are, talking to this consultant who's clearly knowledgeable. She's publishing her own book. Yeah, I want your advice. So she gave amazing advice, and I pitched, and I got a bunch of interest. All right, no problem. I come back the next year. I had another book idea, and there she is again. And then I was like, well, how's your book? She goes, I'm still writing it. And I was like, wait a minute. Wait, you don't have it published yet? And so she's like, no, I've been publishing it for the last 5 years. She built a whole consultancy business on just a book cover of a book that she didn't yet publish. So that's just a great example. So here I am. I published my book, and I'm starting from scratch to market it. Here she is marketing her book and has a whole business and revenue model around just the book cover. So I think it's very viable to go out there with the idea and see how many people want to bite and build that community. We're in an era now where it is community first, and we see business models changing right in front of us. Businesses are going to be smaller, more agile, more collaborative, and they're going to be built on community. And I would say over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen, I'll just use YouTube influencers as an example, where they created a community and then they built a whole enterprise around it. And within the high days of the bull run back in 2020, 21, we saw projects launch off the back of community. And now we're seeing that, okay, this model is sticking. People want to follow and consume from people they know and trust. And so also understanding that you as the founder, being out there, showing who you are, why you're doing this, the passion behind the product, you're going to help aggregate a community that wants to support you and not see you fail. And so your clients are going to be like, wow, I really like you. How can I support you? You know what? Your product may not be right for me, but I know someone or 3 other people that'll be perfect for. So even just getting out there initially before the product and just being vulnerable with who you are, why you're doing this, the problem you're solving, that's going to allow you to gain the traction you need, which is so, so important. And again, as the artist and creator, my premise has always been product first. I got to create the dress and then sell it. I got to create the magazine and then sell it. I got to create the book and then pitch it or whatever to readers. Now it's like, create the community, let them fall in love with you. Maybe your clients or your end consumers, if they're B2C, and whatever you introduce to them, they're going to want to consume. They're going to want to support you because they're really buying a piece of you. So it's a whole new paradigm. And those that are able to adapt quickly are going to really see the benefits.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very great perspective. When I launched this podcast, right, I was approaching, I was transitioning, 30 plus years in consulting and professional services, transitioning niche down into the AI space, right? But I really found this as a way to really kind of give back to the community, like bring up people like yourself. We've had a range of folks across the AI, artificial AI, ML experience, different kind of business owners, different kind of founders, and to give the people that are actually doing it day in and day out, right? Instead of just reading a book and your perspective, your journey, your insights, and hopefully that's going to empower and help other people out there, to be able to move forward in this space,
Yeah, 100%. I think having a podcast is such a brilliant idea. I started podcasting in 2019 and I'm going to go back to my old business model, create the product, and then, if they come. And, thankfully, the information I was sharing was resonating and it did grow, pretty quickly. But then it stalled out. So then you're really dependent on your traditional means of marketing. And I feel that if you have the podcast as a support to a product or service, as opposed to the podcast being the product in and of itself, then you're following this new paradigm that we're talking about. And being that thought leader and giving back with your knowledge, because, we're sitting here, no one's paying us to be here. We're creating the environment, we're building the scripts, we're all these things, we're getting the tech to deliver it, distribute this information. And it's valuable for individuals and they're not paying for it. And so that's giving back. That's your time, that's your knowledge, that's your experience. And then, oh, by the way, I have this book. So if you want to dive deeper, or I have this retreat, if you want to, recharge, somewhere for the week, whatever it is, now they're like, wow, you gave that to me. I'm going to support you with this other thing that you're doing. So I think your podcast is an excellent idea of how you're marrying your consultancy with this ability to give back through knowledge and sharing and community. And I think that's what people are looking for.
I appreciate that perspective. So, on the technology side, so do you have a technology team? How are you building out the architecture? What are some of the technologies that you're using? Especially for some folks that are a little bit more on the techie side, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So initially, I had this idea and I'm like, wow, well, how do I do this? And I found a platform that created a UI UX for you to build on top of OpenAI. And I had been, prompting for over a year and a half. So I felt confident in how to speak to the tool in order to get the output I wanted. So I built on top of their platform. But then I realized there was a lot of limitation to it. And from a customization standpoint, as I was getting in the market and talking to individuals and seeing what their needs were, and I needed something more robust and I needed my own independent platform. So then I had to hit the pavement looking for a development team. And I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not an engineer. I'm not a coder. I'm not a blockchain developer. I'm not an AI engineer or researcher, but I am an enthusiast. I am a user, and I've been in the space, writing about it, speaking about it, so I can communicate with these individuals. And we then decided on, based on the features that we wanted to incorporate, what tech stack we would use. But even prior to that, I did a test run utilizing the GPT tool that OpenAI offered, where you can create your own GPT in their GPT store. And we launched the chat version of it, the chatbot version of it, and it soared to become the #1 fashion app for that first week that we launched that. So I was like, okay, great. This really low-level concept is resonating. So then that's where I had to refine the app on my own, but then started to look for developers. So right now we're using Python, which we're going to also migrate off of as our user base increases, to allow us just a bigger load of users. We're using, the Amazon Cloud Services to support us until we get our own independent GPU. And we initially started with Stable Diffusion for our image generation, and decided that it wasn't working. And so we went back to DALL-E 3 and started to fine tune that, because that was the initial POC and that's what that was built on. But we're customizing it through the code and the algorithms, and we're integrating it with several APIs to allow us to do the OCR, like the image recognition, and the shopping features as integration, and the customization around the personality aspect of the tool. So I don't want to give away all the secret sauce, but
no, that's good. But in terms of the fine tuning, right? So how are you fine tuning the model? So is it prompting? Is it more images? So explain to the folks how you kind of fine tune. So let's take a step back. There's a general model, whether it's an LLM or whatever, it's trained on general data, right? But then when you want to use it for a specific use case, like in your case, it's not necessarily trained. It has to be trained a certain way. It's kind of like, teaching a fashion model how to walk down the runway for the first time, So you got to train it to do that. So maybe give your perspective on how you're kind of fine tuning the model.
Yeah, and I love the analogy. So we know that if you put a prompt in, it's going to give you an output. And the problem that a lot of models have now, as it relates to fashion images within this space, is the consistency. And so, the tools have a level of creativity where they're going to just add a little bit of whatever they want into the sauce, right? So sometimes you'll get an image without text. Sometimes you'll get an image with text. Sometimes you'll get very cartoon.
An extra eye.
An extra eye, yeah. You'll get an extra eye, an extra leg. You'll get a cartoony style, or you'll get a hyper-realistic, hyper photorealistic style. And so one is to create that consistency in style. And also, how do you work around the negative prompts? Because not all the tools work well with negative prompts, and DALL-E does not work well with negative prompts. So it now becomes, how well do you communicate with the tool? And literally day and night, if you do not have the right prompt, you are not going to get the output you want. And I think that is the problem with the consistencies that we're seeing, because the engineers were testing it weeks and weeks with various prompts and back and forth and back and forth. And then it was, okay, guys, have you used the prompt that I created in the POC? Oh, we haven't used that yet. Well, let's use it day and night in terms of results. And because I had been, working with prompting for over a year and a half, I knew some of the nuances with the various tools and what would work and what wouldn't work. So I know initially when the space, opened up, prompt engineering was this new term that came in the space and everyone's like, oh, that's going to go away. That's going to go away. Maybe the term will go away, but the skill set is very real. And if you have the right skill set, you could take that to almost any generative AI platform and apply it. Maybe for text to text, text to video, text to code. If you understand the language of the tool, you're going to get better results. And so now with a very specific tested prompt, we're getting consistent images from a style standpoint, format standpoint. And now we're fine tuning to make sure that it's integrating the various APIs in the way of personalization that we want.
Especially in your use case, it's fashion, it's high fashion. So the quality, there's a certain degree of quality and the expectation around that. So it can't look cartoonish, it can't look amateur, it's haute couture, right? So it has to fit that category. And training the model to do that. So the prompt engineering, the instructions that you're typing into the model. I played a bit with some of these models out there. They're like Stable Diffusion and the Flux models. And it's amazing what some people can do with some of the prompts. They even put the kind of camera, the kind of sunlight, aperture, whatever. They put all these little tweaks in there to be able to get a certain result. And it's amazing. You think all these tools are the same, but you can put the same prompt in and you'll never get the same image again. It's a completely random generated, unless you find a way to tweak the parameters to keep some stability in the picture, right? But it's interesting.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so as a fashion designer, I've had to do a lot of photo shoots. I work with models. I have to direct the imagery, maybe for a video shoot or a editorial that we're doing, both for my own collection, but then also for the magazine. So I'm bringing that creative direction, that experience to the tool and the prompting, the camera angles, the setting, the lighting, the styling. And so if you're not in the space, you're not going to have that language, those words, and that point of view. And I think that's what people don't understand when they think AI. It's like, oh, add 3 words and you're going to get the most perfect output, whatever that output is, if it's a code or if it's an image or if it's a video. And if you have more experience in the area that you are using it for, you're at an advantage. And so that's, I think, what people have to understand is, what are you bringing to the table? Are you a coder? You're going to get a much better result than someone who wasn't trained in coding, if you're using it to help you code. And in my case, I'm using it to help me design or to style. And because I have that experience, I can bring that to the table. And I think that's where we're going to see the differences, not only in, understanding that every output isn't going to be the same, because most people think that, oh, if I put balloon in Stable Diffusion and I put balloon in Midjourney and I put balloon in ideogram or runway, it's going to be the same balloon. Wrong. And so you'll get a balloon, but none of them are going to look exactly the same. So I think it's really important to just understand the technology and how it works, understand what you're bringing to the table, so how you can really leverage it, leverage your background, leverage your experience to deliver the best solution possible. So that's what I found, and I think it's going to continue to play out, and I've seen it in many use cases time and time again.
So for the accelerator, obviously now you're figuring out the technology, you're building out the MVP, right? So the next step is, what are your plans to scale the business, right? So is there a way for you to introduce more AI into this without making it more complex? So what's your approach to scaling in the next couple of months?
Yeah. So, I think for most startups, one of the biggest problems is getting customers, getting leads. And so my initial outreach will be through my personal contacts and relationships. I have a strong network, a large network online. So it's also, getting more visibility and brand awareness as relates to my personal brand. So as I share about the product when it's ready to be publicly shared, I'll have that support. But then also identifying tools that will help me scale and automate customer acquisition. And that's where tools like Getly AI come into play, where I can really hone in on the region and the type of company or person that I'm looking for to create a more personalized list of customers that I then can reach out to. and then finding the best email automation tool to then use that in conjunction with the initial search tool. So I have access to both within Getly, but, some people may have one or the other. If they don't have the CRM, then they'll need to find a scaling tool, as a CRM where it's not just you personally emailing one by one by one by one. When you're talking about scaling, so it's sort of a multi-prong approach. It's using that community building strategy that I mentioned earlier. It's reaching out to my existing network, and again, I have a slight advantage because I do a lot of public speaking at events, so that's an initial customer, and I can offer them an added value. And then 3 is coupling what I'm doing with automation outside of my product, which incorporates automation, and looking at lead generation tools to do that and communication tools to do that.
Yeah, whether you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, somebody starting a business, right? I think that one of the most underappreciated skills is the whole marketing and lead gen aspect. Because, I've been launching my business. I've done everything from strategy to go-to-market execution. But now I have my CMO hat, right? And then, right, and that's the most important thing, because without the marketing and lead gen, there's no sales, right? So being able to get your brand out there, get that visibility, right? So I see what you're doing too is in sense of using some of the low-hanging fruit in terms of AI is really around lead gen, automation, the hyper-personalization, right? Integration with the CRM, and CRM is the customer relationship management tool that stores the contact information and your history of interactions with the customer. Then you're probably going to introduce some automations on the operation side, because you don't go hire 100 people. With AI you can do some automations to make be able to deploy quickly, etc. And then also, one of the advice that we give some of the companies out there is like, you don't have to put AI everywhere. Either it's the low hanging fruit or the highest value place. What's your biggest problem, and what's going to be the biggest impact and return that you're going to get from that? I mean, but you have to factor in all the costs and the time to do that, right? But really figuring that out is going to be, I think, challenging for most companies going forward.
I agree. I always recommend start with the problem and decide what tool will best solve the problem. And if we're just let's just look at an entrepreneur, for example, or a solopreneur. Are you a good writer? If not, then find a copywriting tool. And are you a good marketer? If not, find a great lead generation tool or CRM. So I think absolutely that is correct. With our tool that we're creating, our platform, Aura, the thought was our clothes are our second skin. It's telling the story about us. And, when you hear the word aura, you think of that glow that someone would have, this, colored glow that says something about them. And that's what the tool is like. And how do we do that where we can, when I had my showroom and store in New York, people would come in off the street and I would literally have conversations with them, get to know them. What's the event you need an outfit for? And then we start designing and measuring and going back and forth. And I knew them personally. So they would come back and say, okay, now I have a wedding. Oh, now I have a conference. Now I have a fundraiser. And now my question to myself was, how do I duplicate myself? Because I can't be everywhere. And so this platform, Aura AI, allowed me to duplicate myself. This is the solution I was creating. How can I democratize this beautiful experience of personalization that someone has when they come into my store or my showroom? And so now I can do that using automation. Now, the next problem is, how do I scale? And we know the future of companies are going to be a lot leaner, right? Where a large company is going to be somewhere between 10 and 50 people. Like, whoa, you got 50 people on your staff? Like, that's crazy. Like, in the future, this is what we're looking at. And so if we know companies are going to be leaner and they're going to stay more agile, and you're not going to, potentially hire 12 people to stay lean, then you're going to need automation tools. And so this is where the, tools like Getly and then solving problems with automation. Like I said, automating, duplicating me in the service that people love so much when it comes to customization in fashion, using Aura AI to do that. So yeah, it's not everywhere. I don't use AI everywhere, but I started with the problem and then I found a solution. Where can automation come in to assist me in effectively delivering the solution?
Yeah, no, that's great. And you talked about democratization, right? So that takes us to our next question. So, what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities in making AI accessible to people from a variety of industries and experiences, backgrounds? How can we bridge this gap?
I think fear is a big obstacle, you know? So I'll give it from a few perspectives. I'm a futurist, so I'm a tech enthusiast, but I'm also a cautious cautious optimist because I can see, yeah, if you go right, it could be this. If you go left, depending on the road, the fork in the road, which one you take, it can go wrong real fast or it can be incredibly amazing. And so if I'm an individual that has a perspective coming from fear, then I'm not going to touch the tool. I'm not going to dive deep to learn about it. I'm not going to engage with it, but yet my problems still persist. So that's one thing. The other thing is semantics, language. In the Web3 space, blockchain is a perfect example. There's so much jargon that, either confused people or intimidated people. They couldn't come into the space or it felt like it wasn't for them. So when we're talking about large language models and we're LLMs and open source platforms, and we're talking from a very technical space because we have technicians that are developing and using these platforms as the early adopters. We have to be really considerate about what is the language we're using when we're speaking to the individual outside of the tech bubble, and how do we come from a perspective of abundance as opposed to lack? We're going through a time of a lot of job loss, and that might be at the forefront of someone's mind. But then we have a whole, landscape of new roles that never existed, like prompt engineer. Like, what was that a few years ago? That wasn't even a thing. And so we have such a great opportunity ahead of us if we are looking from a perspective of abundance. We are being conscious and ethical in our approach with these technologies. We're being sensitive to the fact that we're putting humans first. We're being knowledgeable that we don't want the tool to lead us, but we want to be the ones that are shaping the use cases of the tools. We want to have a voice in how they're used. We have to be active in inviting everyone to the party and not like bringing a few people in, locking the door and saying hi to everyone looking in the window. And that's, making it more accessible through the language we're using, the use cases we're developing. When, again, I'm going to go back to blockchain because that was initial space that I started in. When you're talking about decentralized finance and you're throwing around acronyms and you have a UX that's horrible for someone that's not a developer or a coder, how do you expect people to get involved and get excited? And similarly, this is what we need to do. OpenAI did a great job of keeping it simple as it relates to their UX, and we see the result of that. And so I think as entrepreneurs and startups, when you're creating your solutions, keeping the UX, the UI, the user experience, the user interface as relatable as possible, use words that a third grader will understand. Be inclusive in your conversations, invite people to the party. And what else? Be optimistic, be intentional, be positive in your perspective, and be sensitive to people's fears. And so if we don't acknowledge that there's, these things that could be potentially negative happening and we don't address them, we're not being sensitive or compassionate. So I think it's being aware that everything isn't, roses and rainbows, but how do we address that? Let's create more jobs then. How do we create more jobs? How can we use automation to create more jobs? How do we talk about these new roles? How do we advertise these new roles? How do we educate for these new positions? So these are some things that we can do to help bridge that gap.
Yeah, no, and going back to our previous conversation too, the combination the automation and the democratization, right? I think in the near term, there is going to be a lot of job loss, and the people that don't, there's a lot of fear, like AI is going to take our jobs, and, people can't adjust or transition into this space, right? But there's also the flip side of that in terms of a new generation of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs that are coming up using agentic AI or, AI agents, and instead of having to go hire an intern or a costly training program for, a couple people, you can put together, a couple of AI agents, and you may need a hierarchy to deal with the principal agent problem, and make sure that nothing goes off the rails in a sense, right? But there's an opportunity to really build, people are saying that there could be one-person companies, that could be multi-billion-dollar companies because using AI and using these agents and using the tools. But we've got to do it in a very practical way, which is leads me to my next question. You kind of brought it up too, is like, what we always bring up ethical and responsible AI. So how can we balance AI innovation and fast time to market with ethical and responsible AI governance and development? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's such an important conversation to have because we get so excited as builders and creators. We just want to build and create. And I think we have the responsibility to do that consciously. My initial give back was writing a book. Beyond the public speaking and the podcasting was, how do I help individuals dispel the fear, but introduce the ethical conversation, introduce the concept around this hybrid new work model that we're creating between man and machine, this co-creative process that we're creating, and talk about that, to introduce the idea of the jockey on the horse, which is the name of the book, where, the horse can't win the race on its own if you're not training it properly, feeding it properly, etc. And the jockey needs the horse to win the race. How do you work together? Because if the jockey is abusing the horse, if the jockey is neglecting the horse, if the jockey isn't properly communicating with the horse is going to be like, you want me to do what? And so understanding the tool, respecting both the positive and negative aspects of the tool and being intentional, I think is something that we all need to do. And also, each of us that are creators, that are at the forefront, we're innovators, we're builders, to help dispel the fear, but also to disseminate the information and knowledge like you're doing now with this podcast. How can we participate as the ambassadors, the champions, the public speakers, the educators, the tutors, the trainers, the teachers? How do we participate with the knowledge that we have? And it could be through a book, like The Jockey on the Horse. It could be through a podcast, like AI Space. It could be through public speaking. It could be through mentoring. I did 2 brief mentoring sessions this week to individuals that said, I want to learn more. Can you help? Everyone has 5 minutes. And then so I think that's what we need to do. And that's also being conscious. That's also being, ethical. The more that we understand the technology, the more ethical we can be because we understand how it works. Well, we don't even understand how it works. We could be going off the rails with what we're doing. So I think that education is key, knowledge is key, but also taking a moment to pause and be respectful, like, whoa, okay. My company, instead of growing to 1,000 employees, I may only grow to 10, but then how do I help 1,000, individuals live better lives? And there's so many ways that you can do that, And so I think it's just being really intentional on human first, human first, human first. And if we keep that in mind and we're more conscious as we build, then we're going to create this really beautiful, positive future that we're all here to create. Or what's the point? Like, what if we're not creating a better way to live with these technologies? What is the point? So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think we have a responsibility to shape the future, and hopefully we haven't unleashed Pandora's box and, the law of unintended consequences, right? But, as we go forward, we have to, as you said, put a human face on this, right? And also do this in an ethical and responsible way. And one of the things that we try to do on the show, on the podcast, some of the feedback that we do get is that we're breaking down very complex AI concepts into something that's understandable um, relatable, practical, and actionable, and that's why we have folks like yourself that are coming on that are actually embracing AI, able to, yeah, there's a little bit of fear, there's a little bit of concern, right? But we have to move forward and do it in a good way, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that access is something we don't want to ignore as well. There's a term I use that the train is in the station. And if you're in the house and your TV's blasting, you're not going to hear the toot toot of the train, right? So you're clueless that the train is even here. And then the train takes off. And you're like, what? Well, I wanted to go to Kansas too. You know? And so, if we can create more access where as many people as possible have the opportunity to get on the train, you don't have to, because I don't think this is for everyone. You could be a cobbler, making handmade shoes, and you are as happy as can be, and that's fine. And I don't believe it's for everyone, but if you want to participate in this new digital city that we're building, and you're not aware that these tools are here, they're accessible, they're available, or you don't know how to get access to them, you don't know who to talk to, what door to go through. And again, it comes down to individuals such as ourselves to provide that access. And there's many ways to do that. You're creating an event, for example. You're creating a solution, for example, that's easy to use and relatable. You're creating educational platforms like this, for example. How do we create more access? So we have not just the carpenters, building the city, but we have the electricians, we have the plumbers, we have the engineers, we have the storekeepers. How can everyone have a say and participate in what we're creating for our future? And I think that's the goal. Of course, more conscious creativity, more ethical practices, human-first solutions, and then access to as many people as possible. And is your solution or technology providing access? I think that's something to ask yourself. I'm creating access to democratize customization and personalization around fashion with Aura AI, or I'm creating access where creatives that are not the most technical people can learn about AI through The Jockey on the Horse, the book. You're creating access through this podcast with knowledge, and maybe someone will see, our conversation and reach out to you for advice, or reach out to me for advice. I don't know where to get started. How do I get started? What tools should I use? Basic questions that people may be afraid to even ask, So I think that's something that we should also have as a priority as we move forward and build and create.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. Yeah, if somebody is struggling out there, please reach out to one of us if you need some guidance or help, And then that's really takes us to our last part, so, what I call encouragement section. So any concluding thoughts, insights, encouragement to those seeking to get into space or struggling to build their business?
Listen, for all of you listening out there, if a little girl from Jamaica can be building a tech startup, you could do anything. One of my designs, which I created with generative AI, landed on the moon last year. And if you were going to tell me a few years ago that I would have a piece of me or my creation on the moon, I'd be like, yeah, right. But it was me being curious, taking a chance on myself, reaching out to individuals like yourself, thought leaders, following thought leaders, asking questions, reading blogs, articles, learning about the technology, and then taking the chance and starting to use it. That allowed me to have that opportunity to be selected as an impact artist and have my art sent to the moon as part of this beautiful project through Bit Basel and the Luna Prize Museum. But it was being curious. It was taking the time to learn. It was connecting with thought leaders in the space, and then acting. Because we could take in the information, but if we don't act, then what? So those are some things that I wanted to just, again, if I could do it, you could do it. I love to lead by example. So I'm going to continue to build and create and share as someone that can inspire others to do the same.
Yeah, awesome. I think you and I could talk all day about AI, fashion, creativity, all the different tools here. So we're coming up on time, but for our listeners, where's the best place where they can learn more about House of Nova or connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on social. I'm very active on LinkedIn because, as a thought leader, that's where a lot of thought leaders live and share. So Nova Lorraine on LinkedIn, The Real Nova Lorraine on Instagram. You could also find me at Nova Lorraine on X and most other platforms, Pinterest, TikTok.
Yeah, awesome. So in the show, we had a full show today, in terms of talking about your journey. You're in that accelerator, you're building out your technology stack. We talked about MVPs, using AI tools in terms of creativity, prompt engineering, right? Scaling your business, looking for opportunities where are the pain points, where it's going to be the most value, making sure that we're integrating ethical and responsible AI, so we're not creating a dystopian future. We actually create some sort of utopian future.
That's right.
So I think that's been great in terms of the show. So fantastic. Everyone, make sure to check out and connect with Nova Lorraine. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now and find us on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify. I've learned so much from this episode, and I can't thank you enough, Nova, for sharing your insights with us today. I'm your host, Sanjay Kalluvilayil, founder and CEO of Stonehouse Advisors. I hope you gain a wealth of game-changing insights to grow, transform, and scale to new levels and dimensions leveraging AI. Thanks so much, everybody. See you next time.